We are lucky to have Greg with us tonight. Bob went out with Mark fishing, fell out of the boat. Then Mark's got a habit of trying to get up to 90 miles an hour, so you lose your hearing aids. Bob lost one of them. He takes Greg out. Greg's excited to go, and Greg drops his phone in the lake. So if you can't get a hold of Greg, call Mark. And of course, Mark's got good insurance, and it will pay for a new phone. Isn't that right? He used to be a diver. Oh, I've done that, stepped on a hook. That's how I found the rod. But that's another story. That'll be in my book. It is fun. It's fun to get out in God's creation. The ones I feel sorry for is everywhere they go, and it's different ages. You know, you'd think. Number one, the worst users of cell phones is Gen X. Baby boomers are the worst about not using them. The new generation don't use them as much as their parents did. But you got folks outside of that phone world, they got no earthly idea what's going on. I can be driving somewhere and I'll say, Donna, did you see that black cat out there behind that oak tree? No. I see everything. It's just my nature. I want to know what's in everyone's yard. All right, so we're praying for you, Greg. All right, Dale Buchanan awaits the results of his biopsy. Louise Berger is having tests on her heart. And Rose Carter is trying to be scheduled for cataract surgery. And one day, VA is going to check Charles out. And I think one of the worst things about what Charles has got, well, really anything like that, cancer doctor, is the waiting. Man, if I can nail it down, this is what we're going to do, it kind of sets you at peace. All right, Greg Smith is in mourning over his phone. All right, be turning to the book of James chapter 5. And tonight what we're doing is talking about living patiently. Does anyone need questions for living patiently? Mike, if you would give these out. And what I try to do is, instead of just catching the question at the end of the class, I kind of catch them as we're going through. And what took up most of the class is I asked the husbands and the wives, in what area is your husband and or wife impatient? And I think that took up the whole class. And so we asked the wife about, what is your husband impatient about? And vice versa. And I think sometimes we just don't realize how impatient we are about certain things. I actually practiced one of them. I still haven't got to the point where I'm going to let people in that want to fly up on the inside and come into your lane. But I did choose the longest line at the lights. Don't work very good, but I'm still working on it. But I found a horn. If they don't move quick enough, there's a round button in the middle of your steering wheel that moves them a little bit faster, I think. All right, let's read James again. As James goes back and he references some of the people who are examples of patience. We dealt with Abraham from the book of Genesis, two promises that were made, that he would be the heir of so many, like the sands on the seashore, like the stars in the sky. And he was 75 years old, and he waited 25 years for Isaac. And by the way, there were already two sons, one that was adopted, and then there was Ishmael. And God, no, there's one coming. And that's where we find the word of God had a son, the only begotten. Abraham had a child, a begotten. And the word begotten there has to do more with not that there was one, but there was only one unique one. And so what we find that Christ was the only begotten of the Father. He was the unique one. He was the only one that could be the Savior of the world. So think more of not birth, but uniqueness. Right, James chapter 5, as he's dealing here with Job, and he's dealing there with patience. In chapter 5, verse 7 beginning, patience therefore, brother, be patient therefore, brother, until the coming of the Lord. Did you read that and wonder what in the world? He's talking to some people. This book was probably written around 40 to 46. And he's telling them to be patient, waiting for the coming of the Lord. Coming of the Lord is not always, the context will tell you, or at least reference it, if you just observe, that the coming of the Lord is not always the end of time. I believe personally here, it would be AD 70. But also, any time that the Lord comes, he may come in judgment, but that's still the coming of the Lord. What he's talking about here is talking about a situation that the church suffered. And Christians sometimes, Donna said that she would never work for another. When she was in school and she started working for a lady who owned like a Dairy Queen, one of the meanest women. And so sometimes Christians can be mean. Under this situation, you've got Christians that are working for rich, and they are done wrong. Two wrongs don't make a what? Don't make a right. And sometimes he's also talking here, do not allow yourself to be done wrong and take it out on other people. It'll poison everything. Do not let the root of bitterness grow up within you. If you are bitter at me, it will affect your relationship with your wife. It will affect your relationship with your children. It will affect your relationship with anybody that you have a close connection with. That bitterness. And I believe that we are now living politically in a very bitter society. Let me prove it to you. I can't do this on Sunday because too many people get mad. But we're grown-ups. We can take it. We can talk about football. Can we not? We can get into great arguments about Razorbacks playing the Auburn Tigers. And when we leave, we're just the best of friends. But when you start talking about different political parties, I'll guarantee you, you won't leave a friend. Why? What is there about politics that defines me that I can't talk intelligently about it or make jokes without someone having a heart attack? We can disagree on everything except that. Okay. And I tell people I keep up with football just to aggravate people. But I did tell one good brother here when I first moved here, I think the Hogs had lost to Auburn 78 to like 11. No, because I was with Jimmy and sitting beside Jimmy, and I knew to keep my mouth shut because I was over in the hog area. And I said to this good brother, it's just a game. That was the wrong thing to say. All right, so we're talking about Christians that were going through such difficult times with the way that they were treated and the way that they were paid or not paid. And so he tells them, be patient for the coming of the Lord. I wonder what they were thinking and what we think at that particular saying. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until he receives the early and the late rains. You also be patient. And so our Lord was the greatest storyteller. There were no such things as metropolitan churches. Everything was rural. And he tells the story about a farmer. You think they understood? If you're talking to Mark or to Charles, you'd talk something about fires. I watched a bunch of firemen in Australia chasing a hose around, and my first thought is, why don't they just go shut it off the engine? But they didn't. They were chasing this hose around trying to catch it. And I don't know if any of you firemen have ever had a hose get loose, but if I'm talking to firemen, what illustration would be most appropriate? And he is saying there is an early rain and there is a late rain. Be patient for it. And so he's now telling the stories that they understand about being patient. Establish your hearts, nail them down, get a foundation, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. When we hear that, what do we think about? Do what? Sooner rather than later. And by the way, the New Testament Christians lived with the idea that Jesus was going to come back, or God was going to come back in judgment in their time. And that's the writing of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, kind of correct that from false prophets, false teachers. We hear it from pulpits today as they look around and they see all the world events, which Matthew 24, he says, when you see these things, know that the end is not near. And yet they pop on over to Revelation, they say, oh, the world's coming to an end. Look, there's a great famine in Africa.
Jesus didn't even know.
Do what?
Jesus didn't know he was coming back.
All right. How does that work in to the omniscience of God, or Christ knows everything? How do you harmonize those two things? If Christ knows everything,
He said only the Father knew.
do what, Bob?
He said only the Father knew.
All right, only the Father knows. What'd you say, Mike? All right, he's repeating what the Father had told him. Also remember, you have Christ who is God. He wasn't a mini God when he was born to Mary. He was God. And yet he grew in the knowledge, grew in obedience even to the cross. Keep in mind there are two situations in which you find Christ. Number one, the Godhead. But also you find that God is in a physical body. I believe that it was in that physical body that he's talking about when he says that no one knows when the end's going to be, only the Father. And so when we hear these expressions, the time of the Lord is at hand, the coming of the Lord is at hand, what were they thinking?
Well, it's relative. I'm talking too much. You know, it's 1,000 years for God. To us, it's several lifetimes.
All right, but if he says it's at hand, we find that in Revelation. We find it with Paul telling Timothy, when you come back, you bring my robe and my scroll, and you come quickly. These things are at hand, soon. And I believe it's relative. It's relative to what they were thinking about and what Jesus is trying to get across.
Mike, don't you think that if Jesus admitted to knowing when, what was the first question anybody was going to ask him? When?
Mm-hmm.
If you know when, what are you going to do up till when? Your obedience won't be there until 5 minutes before when, because that's just human nature. But not knowing, deep in the night, and all those depictions we have of it being unexpected, no signs, it's unexpected. You have to live your life, and it allows you to train yourself to live your life in such a way that if God came back now, and now is when, it's okay. You know, you're not worried about it. But if you knew when, if you knew the instant you were going to die, and you knew you couldn't die until then,
April 18th.
what kind of craziness would you put yourself through?
On the 14th, I would do some really cool stuff.
I get a credit card, buy a new bass boat.
Yes.
It's like, all right, if you're a teenager and you're having a party and you've invited your friends over and you know your folks can be home at 10 o'clock, what time you start cleaning up and telling the folks to get out? And that's what John's saying. You may not know the history here, but brethren, we've had about 3 people. One, I believe it was Bob and I, baptized, there's about 3 of them that had to baptize him. We baptized him one day, he died the next. We've had one that went a week. We've had about 3 that were baptized and then died. Brethren.
When you die, it's time for
You what?
the Lord is near then. It's time for the Lord to come. It's near.
All right. And really, it doesn't, I hope the Lord, like I've said before, I hope the Lord's patient because my sister's not a Christian. I hope that he waits, in my case anyway, for Sue. But the irony of that, it's the Christian life, if you'll give yourself to it, is such a great life. And living the Christian life is not that difficult if we can crucify the flesh. It's those desires of the flesh that give us the trouble, because everything God has said is blessed and blessed and blessed. Blessed are those who, and it's a lifestyle. James F. Woodruff wrote a book on the Beatitudes called The Sayings That Saved My Sanity. And he reads it a little bit different as, if we will live this way, we will live a far better life. And so he's talking about the reigns. Yes, we understand the reigns. You understand that the Lord coming is at hand. It's near. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. When we are impatient, and we may deal with this Sunday, we still have not mastered John 13, 34, and 35. And you commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you. And by this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love one towards another. We're told to love one another as Christ loves us. We can talk about everything it doesn't affect us. It's not the rubber on the road. I've never seen the like of brethren getting their feelings hurt and they go somewhere else. I don't understand that. How do I know that God hasn't put that situation there to craft me to be what he wants me to be? Brethren, we can't get along. Man, close the doors. Forget about evangelizing the community. And so we're told, don't talk against one another. Don't judge one another. And remember, the Bible says you judge righteous judgment. If God has said this is wrong, what is it? It's wrong, and it'll never be right. And I'll give just this one illustration. When you talk to a younger generation, even Christians, they believe that homosexuality and transgender is a social issue and not a Bible issue. And that people have the right to be happy. And so you need to stay out of their business. Brethren, that is as foreign to the Bible as it can be. And so, in many places, they just choose not to deal with it. And in such case, ignorance continues. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. As an example of suffering and patience, brother, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord by the authority of the Lord. Behold, we consider those blessed who remain steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job. Tell me something about Job.
He's a rich man.
He's what?
He's a rich man.
Okay. He's what?
He got a raw deal.
He got a raw deal. Nothing that he had done. If you start in there in chapter 1 through chapter 3, not only does God, when God says to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? Man, you don't need friends like that, do you? He is not saying to Satan, you go after Job. Satan has roamed. He has come out of the cave, the dry places, and he goes after people. And apparently he had found a lot of people, and God is saying, have you even considered Job? He didn't pick Job out. And it's a very interesting book. Job, being written probably within the first 4 chapters of the book of Genesis. It is a book that belongs to the patriarchs, the head of the family. Goes back some 2,000 to about 1,800 years. It covers about 40 some odd years. It's old. It is one of the oldest written books in the Old Testament. And here's a man that thousands of people have read the book of Job and been comforted. Job was, as chapter 1 says, a righteous man. But he is also like Lot. Lot is called a righteous man, but he wasn't sinless. Beginning in chapter 38 through about 40, Job says, I have seen my wretchedness, and I repent. What Job didn't see, and the only sin that we find that Job had, was he was not able to see the big picture. And finally in 38, when he believes that he could talk to God, and God's quiet. He listens to Job, which is, again, such a blessing. And then God speaks. Job sees the big picture, and he repents, even though he was a righteous man. Lot was everything except a righteous man, especially the way he treated his uncle, and yet he's still called a righteous man. And so, have you heard the stories? Going back some 2,000 years, and Job is still used in a story. Who wrote the book of Job? And be careful what you find on a phone. Usually in reading, you can see, if it's Pentecostal, if it's Jewish, or whatever. They've all got a slant to it. Job was from where? From where? Uz. He was from the Jews went to the land of Canaan. Job was from the land of counsel. That's what Uz means. One of the strongest defenses for the writer of the book of Job is Moses. When Moses left Egypt, getting out of the presence of Pharaoh, he went where? Went where? You don't got a piece of chocolate they can throw at Donna? Went to, huh?
Midian.
Why are you mad? I want someone to throw you a piece of chocolate at you. You got the answer right. If Mike Marshall was here, you remember Mike Marshall? He's up there teaching a class, you got something wrong, he'd throw a piece of candy at you. Our dear brother, Raine, you got a piece of chocolate when you got something right from him. I just have to say, well done, Donna. All right, so he comes out of Egypt. He crosses the Reed Sea, what we call the Red Sea, and he went to Midian, and right there below Midian is the land of Uz. And so he's there for quite some time. And in all probability, he's one of the strongest suggestions for the writer of the book of Job. And so the story there, look at Job for patience. You're a drunk driver and you run over and you crash and kill my child. I know what my mind says, I'm coming after you. Two wrongs don't make a right. And so what he's saying is that even with Job, and Job doesn't blame, he doesn't understand God. But he's looking at God's compassion, he's looking at God's mercy. Everything that had happened. And he simply says, I want to question you. I want to come into your court and I want to question you, Lord. And he does. Well, that's a blessing. When you don't understand what's going on and you can question God like that and God listens. And God will finally answer. Now remember how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. And he was to Job, and he is to us, if we will wait for the early and the late rain. So tell me, why is it important for us to live a life of patience? All right. Uh-huh. And what have you got? 42 chapters? Of course, one book. Did God really trust Job that much? Because the difference was how someone in the world would act and how one of my disciples, Job, will act. All right, there's none like it. Not only does Job say, I am a righteous, perfect teleos, I have reached a place of completeness, but God says that about him. And he still had to go through it.
I feel like it's a contrast in James
Unless,
unless it doesn't. But, I mean, as far as he's hopeful of things that he's seen before that allows him to be patient until the right time. Whereas Job, his patience was in his extreme suffering and lack of knowledge and understanding of what's coming next.
when younger people, I was there when all three of our babies were born. Donna would not take an aspirin for 9 months. She took nothing. She went through the births naturally. If it was me having the baby, I'd go to the dentist and I'd say, give me gas. But the minute it's over and you're handed the baby, I've watched with Donna, there's that sigh that I can go through and no, it ain't going to happen. I was about to say, if any of you ladies get pregnant and have twins, but do not laugh at your wife who is pregnant with twins trying to get off a couch. They'll remember that for 40 years. Yes, I am reminded of it. But one reason to be patient, and the good thing about being patient is that in this temporal world, it's not our home. You know, we build houses, we buy houses, we've got money and stuff, but it's temporal. And so we're encouraged in this particular lesson, live a life in view of something better that's coming. I believe that a woman can go through the pain of having a child because something better is coming. And if we know that, even though Job is stuck in a dark, dark valley for a long time, there's going to be light. The sun's going to rise. And I think the older you get, I hope the more that we realize that. When you tell a younger person, and I'm not against young people, don't misunderstand me, but they just think the situation they're going through is going to last a lifetime. And we, being wiser, I hope, come up and say, it won't last long. And they're thinking what? All right, here's the button. I've told you this before. We had one youth minister that wanted 86,000. At that time, he was preaching for a congregation of 11 members. And he had the audacity to push one of my impatient buttons by saying, you don't understand what it's like to live in today's society. I was making $280 a week. Had 3 children. And in 1980, we bought our first house with me working, and Donna at that time was taking part-time work. And you tell me I don't know what it's like. That was the button. When I bought my house, 8%, whatever a house is going for right now, the interest rate is still good. Do what? I want through. I want my candy back. Yeah, we bought a house at 18%, 1980. 18%. And somehow, with 3 children and Donna not in the medical world, we made it. How do we do that, Judy? Do I? You have a budget. And so when you do that, and I think, well, we need a car. We don't go to a dealership. I get online, I find a good used one. Number one, that we can afford. Now, if we live patient lives, not only do we know that this is not it, there's something better that's coming. But also, the world's watching how we behave. If we are patient or impatient. And sometimes that's simply, it may be a register at Walmart. They apologize for taking so long. I was standing, I have to eat protein. Donna said, what do you have for breakfast? I said, cup of coffee. No, you need protein. So sometimes I'll stop at Walmart and get a hot dog and take the bun off and try and find Cole and give Cole a big hug. If you get nice shiny onions at Walmart, he's polished them. He's good. Cole doesn't know what 90% is. He does everything 100%. And so I'm standing there in line, and this fellow apologizes. Things don't scan right, and there's him and a little boy. And the little boy's back there, and his dad had bought him some candy and put it into a bag. And his dad's not watching, and I'm standing behind him. He's standing there taking candy bars, putting them in there. I didn't say anything. And finally, the father grabbed the bag and saw it and scanned it. He apologized again. But sometimes it's just a simple word to, like a cashier, thank you. You know me, I shop at Bidfa. And Ed and I were up there Monday. And the little sweet gal in there normally says, have a blessed day. And she didn't. And I reminded her, you haven't blessed me today. And she blessed me, and I thanked her. Just little things, opposed to being an irritated, mean. And so the writer here is trying to remind them that while you're going through difficult times, hardships and burdens, be patient. Don't take it out on your bread. Don't take it out on anybody, because people are watching. And brethren, this ought to be true with the example that we have with Christ and the way that we have treated him. And there's still the two words that we find there. There's still compassion and there's still mercy. So we live patiently because we know something better is waiting for us. We need to live patiently so the world around us can see that there's something different about us. Any questions? Good to have you back, Jeff. All right, thank you for your attention.
Talked about the rich people who hurt their laborers and all that, and he was saying, to me, he was saying, vengeance is mine. You just go ahead and do regular things.
Yep, God will judge them.
Take care of things later.
But there's also, that